Warning, incoming game over. Warning, incoming game over.
Bonsoir, mes amis. Welcome to Game Over Montreal. I'm Andrew Berkshire. I'm here with Conor Tomalty, and the Montreal Canadiens just beat the reigning Stanley Cup champions for the second straight time. They are continually in the mix, and we're going to talk about the future a lot tonight, I think, because I think this was a game that in a way set the table for the rest of the season and this rebuild taking a turn. I think it's time to get hyped up a little bit. We're going to talk about that after we break down the game a little bit in the first segment here with Connor. But before we get into it too much, got to tell y'all, you got to go back and check out Hyperdrive Hockey. We're on a little bit of a break right now because Daff had to switch up her work arrangement a little bit. She had to switch from working at home to working in the office, so there's less time for us to record the show. But you can go back through the back catalog, look at some of the stuff that Hyperdrive Hockey has said this year, and look at how it's turned out. They've been pretty on point about a lot of stuff. I think especially the Alex Ovechkin goal scoring race. It's a really great show. I highly suggest you all check it out. It's really, really good. Find it on YouTube or wherever you find your podcast. Just search Hyperdrive Hockey. It's on the Game Over Network channel. Subscribe there anytime. Just click on Game Over Montreal if you're watching this on YouTube, or if you're listening as a podcast, you know where to search. YouTube, anywhere you can get your podcasts. You'll find it, all right? All right, so Connor, let's get into the game here. That was a hype one, wasn't it?
That was amazing. I think that was the first thing that you and I said when we got on our like pre-stream stream, which was that it was a big aura game, but it was also just like a huge game for the atmosphere at the Bell Center, the wave after the Dvorak goal that was like 10 minutes straight, like going around the entire arena. It was just a really good sense of a hockey city getting some really good hockey at a really crucial time, and especially with such like this young, very nascent and still raw team that is still like to a degree still, it's hard to believe, still finding chemistry to a degree, like in this point in the season and still with everybody else or everybody all together for sure.
Yeah, it's been really interesting because I think a lot of the focus has been on the top line coming out of the Four Nations face-off, and for good reason. They've been absolutely incredible, and we're again tonight. Like Slavkovsky has taken a step, and I know we kind of saw this same thing happen last year in the second half where the points started to come, but last year it felt like the step was taken far earlier in the season, and the points kind of came later. This year it was kind of a stutter step start of the season, right? Like he had some stretches where he was playing well, some stretches where it wasn't feeling that great. We know he started the season with an injury, and now it's gone from, it's not just about producing points. It's more often than not right now, Slavkovsky is a dominant force in the game where he is changing momentum of games. He's changing plays from could have been to happening, right? And that consistent kind of play, it's not just about the point production. It's about what he's able to facilitate for his line mates and the rest of the players on the ice. And it's been a huge step. It's really encouraging to see.
Absolutely. I think that was something that I was noticing. The TSN broadcast shouted it out a little bit, but the battle between him and Seth Jones tonight, was absolutely electric to watch. You're seeing a big body Slavkovsky, which is the weirdest thing I'm going to say tonight, probably. Just go at it with like a
No
guy who is
promises.
actually, yeah, no promises. Actually, I'm quite a shenanigans guy. Go against the guy who's actually bigger than him and not be afraid to throw around the body and like battle hard in the corner, make sure he has that net front presence that's like really been clicking for him. So yeah, it's been really cool to see. Like I don't know necessarily that like last year we'd see that sort of grittiness and that sort of battle from Slavkovsky. I don't think that's a guarantee, but this is definitely a year where like he definitely looks way more settled, not just like in his experience on the ice or like just his presence on the ice, but just like in himself as a hockey player. And that as a Habs fan and Montreal hockey fan is just a really good thing to see.
100%. That's such a good point that he feels himself like as a hockey player, growing into the player that he's going to be. And like every game, it seems like he's closer to that player. You know, there is a progression happening. It's not always linear, but you can see it. And I think that's what has been exciting about this team under Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton for me, is seeing the blueprint and seeing the plan, which I think is fairly clearly laid out for anybody paying attention, and watching the pieces fall into place and seeing like, oh, maybe there's a problem here, like Kirby Doc, right? not working out at this moment, has had terrible injury luck, really had a tough time this year recovering from those injuries, and now same knee again, devastating. Now we'll get to see them like reorient their strategy on the second line center. They're trying new hook. They gave back a little look. There'll be different options that they'll look at going into next season. But everything they do is so well planned, and like you can see the thought process behind it. There's nothing random. There's no panic. And what gets me about this game in particular, as kind of like a microcosm of this whole group, is I think this was the first game this season where the Canadiens played a complete game. From the opening whistle to the final horn, I thought they were on it all game tonight. Doesn't mean that they outplayed the Panthers the whole time, but I thought that when the Panthers had momentum, the Canadiens were absolutely clinical defensively. They got they earned an edge in the power plays, yes, overall, but in terms of what was happening and what was called, it was way out of whack with the actual game, right? And they managed to get through that. They didn't lose their cool. They took advantage of their few opportunities when they had them. And when the game was on the line, they were by far the better team. So
I was going to say,
I'm just very impressed.
absolutely. I think one of the things that was like really standing out to me in the third period was they went into the third period. I looked at the shot totals and I was like, wow, this is a really low shooting game when it comes to like pucks actually hitting the goaltender. Like it was a game the whole like way through that felt like defenders were just getting to shooting lanes. There was just really good obstruction on both sides of the ice when it came to that. But the Panthers, I think, got up to like 20 shots by the end of the game, especially with that last penalty late when Montebello made that incredible, just like wicked, like
Beauty.
like amazing robbery with the glove, like absolutely taking away that like open space on his glove side. I like that was it. Like it was a game that is not just complete, but it felt that the Canadians did the right thing with each moment that came. Like you built the lead in the first with the 2 goals. The second, like you're dealing with the penalties and like honestly, like we all are talking about the pick that was set by Bennett in the second period for that goal. And like just the interferences that were going clearly like on one side's favor and not the other. And then you go to that late third period, Montebo with the big save, defenders being able to track the puck, get into shooting lanes, and just like completely thwart a dangerous power play for as well. Like just well, I mean, Panthers are missing some key players obviously, but like that power play was something that like I was on the edge of my seat. I couldn't look away from the screen at all. Just like really, really good play from the Canadians all the way through, as you said.
Yeah, and what I'm looking through, and I know that there's going to be players that are on like the low end of like the stat sheet. If you go by like the analytics and stuff, you're never going to have all players in the positives against a team like the Florida Panthers, right? But I'm going through the lineup. There's not a single player on this team tonight that I'm like, they didn't bring it. Like there are players who made mistakes for sure against a really good team like Florida, but I don't think any player on the Montreal Canadiens tonight had an off game.
That's it. And I would think that like no player, if they did make a mistake, made it a habit to keep making mistakes. I think one of
Yeah.
the first things that I noticed was very, very early in the game was Jaden Struble. Puck was sort of bouncing towards him. And it's one of those weird angles that you can't really see on the TV because like it's like left-handed stick. The puck's bouncing off the boards and like you can't tell like where the blade is on the ice, whether or not he's getting in front of it and stopping it from going past the blue line. But I remember just like it looked to me, and again, I'm not a hockey like expert guy. I haven't even been to the ODR once this whole winter, so like just like if you really want to judge me. But just seeing Jaden Struble, like the puck get past him and just sort of like see him sort of lock in. He's been playing really well with Hudson. Like it was strange. Like I've seen a lot of people talking about how that pairing with Hudson on his offside is actually like they're doing really well together. And I
They
don't know if
are.
it's just like that young chemistry or that sort of young clickiness to them. But like Struble made a quick correction. I couldn't think of anybody tonight that I was really like disappointed with. I think like Line A is a guy that I usually mainly notice on the power play, obviously, but like
Yep.
on even strength, he really did do well tonight. I really liked
Did.
all the depth out of everybody tonight. I have no bad grades to hand out to anybody who is wearing tricolors. I'll just say
And
that.
and that's a good feeling. It's not a feeling even when a team is in a competitive window. That's not a common thing where nobody has an off game, right? Like nobody is wearing the goat horns. It was a really impressive performance from the Montreal Canadiens tonight, and I think that's something that we have to like really focus in on. And I think you bring up Jaden Struble. I wanted to talk about something specific with him because he had several really great plays tonight, and I find he's a player that if he's not thinking, he is excellent. Like if he just reacts, his instant reaction is usually the right reaction. Sometimes he takes big risks. There was a play, I think it was in the first period, where he got the puck on like his side on the right side, down below the goal line. He was under a bit of pressure, and he decided to fire the puck straight in between two Florida Panthers in front of Montembeault to, I think it was Joshua Waugh on the other side to try to clear the zone. And it was an incredibly risky play, incredibly risky, and he executed it perfectly. And then later in the game, after Bennett gets away with that pick that causes the one Florida Panthers goal, Bennett, I think it was Bennett, it might have been Sturm, tried to run almost the exact same pick on Struble, and Struble saw it happening and just plowed through whoever it was. And I'm like, this guy, when he has games like that, he has like this presence about him that you don't expect. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Frankie Bouillon. Like Bouillon when he had his best games where he's just a bull in a china shop, this 5'8" dude who's like blasting 6'4" forwards, and you're like, how is that even physically possible? I think Struble has a little bit of that with higher level puck skills. It's just he has to work on the consistency. But man, being able to sit and play shotgun with Lane Hutson, I think that's a potential during the rest of the season for Struble to take an extremely big step going into next year, where he can move himself from a guy that's kind of filling a hole right now to a guy who's in a roster spot and has to lose it to get out, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think that's something that we were looking at beginning of the year when it came to like just defensive pairings and where's Hudson going to be fitting in with and where's he going to go. And, Struble trying to like fight for his minutes coming out of camp as well. It's just a situation where like it kind of feels like the dust. I mean, of course, it's later in the season, but the dust is sort of settled for a lot of like these defensive guys and trying to figure out like where you're going to play every night consistently and how you can read and react to the game, knowing who's on the other side of the ice with you. And that can help a lot, just having that sort of consistent play, consistent tandeming, and have just a consistent like effort that you're going to put out every night. Not everything's going to go your way, obviously, but again, like you've said, like Struble is playing defense right now, and I don't think anything's too overcomplicated for him. I very recently like I know this is a bit off topic, but I swear to God, it's going to go somewhere. I swear to God. I interviewed somebody on the Concordia women's basketball team who like broke their 3-point single game record. Her name is Alice Fleming. And I asked her, I said, when you shoot a basketball, what's the number one thing that you need to focus on? And she said, not thinking. There should be no thoughts in your head whatsoever when you're shooting a basketball. It should be just an effortless release and not going too much. I saw Jaden Struble tonight, and I was like, I don't want him to think. As you pointed out, Andrew, just reacting. And that's sort of what you want right now. And it's good vibes if your defensemen are having to just react and read the play and not have to do way too much and overcomplicate the scheme. I think that's what we were talking about as well, in the sense of like Martin St. Louis and his structure of like, there was some talks earlier in the system. Is the system too overcomplicated? Are there too many things that like defenders are going to have to adjust for? Are they ready at the NHL level to sort of have this complicated system when it comes to just breaking out, getting the puck past the neutral zone and then into the O zone, being able to read and react on the PK versus the power play and special teams? This was just a situation tonight, like not just Jaden Struble, but just a very sort of simple approach to the game of hockey that was just physical and what you wanted to see for sure.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Hudson and what he's capable of doing, because I feel like we're not talking enough. I know scoring is up in the league, but what he's been able to do this year, like I'm not even trying to like pat myself on the back, because like sometimes at the beginning of the season you throw out some takes that maybe they'll be good, maybe they won't, and it's kind of like a fun thing, right? And when I was talking about Hudson being in the right situation at the right time on the right team, getting a lot of power play time, he's going to have a great season. And like, yes, I 100% believe that. I was saying something that I believed. It made sense based on the evidence available at the time, but not all those things had to work out that way. right? He's earned that top power play time. It took a while for him to get it away from Matheson, right? At the beginning of the year, there was a lot of impatience. Marty gave Matheson a long runway to like figure it out on that top power play unit. It wasn't working. Finally switched to Hudson. At every stage of this season where you've seen people start to doubt and be like, oh, maybe he's going to start falling apart. He's not used to this many games. He's playing too many minutes. Just gets better.
Yeah.
Just gets better. And he has a legitimate shot right now this season to get to 64 or 65 points, which would tie or break the most points for a Montreal Canadiens defenseman in a season since 1989,
Mm-hmm.
when Chris Chelios had, I think, 73. Sheldon Sore and Andrei Markov are tied with 64 at the most in, I think it was 07, 08 for Sore and 08, 09 for Markov, but I could be wrong. Don't quote me. But this kid is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
He's a rookie.
Yeah.
And he's putting
That's the
this
thing.
like,
Well, like, there was the other stat. I don't know. I'm gonna like mess it up, but it was like out of the modern era or like active like defensemen. I think it's like one of the Hughes boys was the one that had like 63 in his rookie campaign. I don't remember what it
Quinn.
was. It was Quinn. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I don't have the thing off the top of my head, but like for Hudson to be in conversations like that, it's also so crazy to me because like I watch this guy play, and I think I'm like a lot of scouts in the sense of like, how the heck did this guy fall to the second round? Like I just like his brother, like who is an incredible hockey player in his own right, owes him a lot in the sense of like his draft stock went so much higher now because of the fact, or it went so much higher because of the effort that his brother put in. And I mean, of course, like Cole deserves the credit he put in as well. But like Lane Hudson just like I don't know if the ceiling is high enough for this kid. Like I feel like he's just like you said, Andrew, like he just keeps impressing. He just keeps dismissing all doubts that you can throw or any argument that you can make towards him. He just keeps on showing out.
yeah, it is honestly incredible. Jean Simard says 53 points in 68 games for Quinn Hughes, which I think is somebody is, I forget who was saying it. There have been a bunch of people talking about it on different socials, but that's like the mark for rookie defenseman for a good stretch time. Might be the last 10 years or something. But either way, one other thing that I saw mentioned on the broadcast, and I'll give the most modest of flowers to, I believe, Gary Galley, who brought it up. It was probably the only relevant thing that he brought up the entire broadcast, because let's face it, he's not very good at that job. He must be a very, very nice guy. But he mentioned that Lane Hudson is also within the window of the all-time record for assists for defensemen as a rookie. I think he said it was Larry Murphy or Brian Leach who said it. I can't recall now. But yeah, Bernardo Sonny says the most assists ever for rookie is 60. Lane Hudson could hit that. Like, legitimately, he could hit that this year. That's crazy.
Yeah. 60 games left in the regular season, the sort of like tear that we're seeing, like it's also no longer solely, I know the top line's been really good, but it's also not solely like just the top line who's scoring. We're seeing like, of course, Liney on the power play, but Dvorak with a beautiful tip tonight as well. Like if we can see more from that and just like that's the thing when we talk about sports and playoffs in the postseason. Sometimes it's not just the best team that wins; it's the team that gets hot at the right time who can really make a deep push. As to like the push this team made a couple years back when Carey Price was still in the building, or excuse me, on the ice, if you will. It's just one of those situations where, like, yeah, I mean, Hudson, like, there's not enough like good things you can say about him. The Calder race is definitely really interesting. I'm seeing a lot of discourse and like support for Dustin Wolf right now, sort of ramping up. So I'm curious to see how it goes at the end of the year. Of course, like if I had a vote, which I don't, and thankfully I don't, because I'm still a bit of a numbskull and like not as vetted compared to a lot of other good writers out there. But if there was a vote, obviously I'm biased towards giving it to Lane Hudson with the way he's just completely balled out.
Yeah, I was talking to Julian McKenzie recently, and he was
J-Mac
pushing.
Yes,
Yeah, right. He's the best. But he was pushing Dustin Wolf in Calgary, and I was like, listen, I get it. Like, I can't really make an argument against Dustin Wolf. We just saw him last week, right? Like, he was absolutely astonishing. He's been that pretty much all season. And I understand the Celebrini one too. Like, he's 18, he's doing incredible things on a team that doesn't have near the structure or support around that Lane Hudson has in terms of like Suzuki, Caulfield, Slavkovsky, etc. But this is a defenseman who's leading the rookie scoring race. Like, we gotta talk a little bit about our guy. And I loved what Rick Springhetti said in the chat there. He said that the lack of hesitation in Hudson's game is astonishing, and that is 100% true. Like, he is able to fool almost anyone in this league because he does not hesitate. No one knows what he's going to do except for him.
That's it. I think one of the things that I really like a good epitomizing of that statement was the almost goal that he had, where he had that sort of clear lane to the net. Wow, clear lane to the net. I'm a genius. I'm so creative. And he sort of like dipsy dude around the defender, but it was sort of that slide tackle that kind of just jarred the puck enough. But I think he had a clear shot, and even Bobrovsky, who is one of the best goaltenders in the NHL, if not the world. Well, obviously the world. I don't think he reacts enough to necessarily make that save. I think like if Lane had a split second more and he could have got past the defender, he could have probably tucked that one home. Like you said, no hesitation to his game whatsoever right now, and it's just really good to see because it feels like any sort of mental shackles that he had before are completely let loose. And it's weird to say because we've seen how elusive he is, and now we're seeing him be elusive to another echelon. So like, who knows what's going to come down the line when he gets, maybe a bit more weight to him, a bit faster here or there, or he just adjusts, or I'm just curious to see like how his game improves and what he focuses on, in the off season and going forward, because again, I feel like we just need to keep raising this kid's ceiling until, he does something, knock on wood, he never does, like that puts everything back into like a reality check. But right now, feels like sky's the limit.
Yeah, it really does. Every expectation I've had for Lane Hudson has been blown apart, and I thought that I was like the overhyper. I had the highest expectations of anyone that I knew, and he's blown past all of it. It's really damn impressive. All right, we're gonna wrap up the talk about this specific game, but we're gonna talk about this specific game in the context of the future over the next couple of segments here. I want to talk about how hyped everyone should be getting about this team. I want to talk about setting expectations for the rest of the season. Obviously, we got to talk about tonight was Pride Night at the Bell Center, and the Habs kind of bottled it a little bit on the social media and promoting it until about 3 hours before the game, which kind of sucks. But Patrick Laine was out there with the Pride tape, and I don't know if Mark or Kay have been able to talk about this. I've been crazy busy the last little stretch. But have we talked about the attacks on Patrick Laine that it came out last week about him potentially faking a virus or faking a flu and not playing? I thought it was mostly in Francophone media, but it did come over into English media as well. I kind of want to touch on that. How do people feel about that? So fill up our comments section there with how you feel about what was going on with Laine, because since coming back to the lineup, I feel like that kind of stuff looks pretty damn unfair and was wrong. But anyway, we'll get talking about that. Before we do, though, we got to tell you about Inchu Bijou, who is a partner here at Game Over Montreal. They're an amazing jewelry store here in the St. Henry borough. So here's an ad for them. We are so excited to tell you about our new partner here at Game Over Montreal, a delightfully witchy, goth, and glam jewelry store making handcrafted art that varies from subtle silver to gold pieces to glamorous bespoke. Inchu Bijou is more than just a company. They've built a community through advocacy and a welcoming attitude that has made them an institution here in Montreal. Located in the historic Chateau Saint-Ambroise, Inchu Bijou also runs seasonal themed markets called Maleficarum Market, or Marché Maleficarum en français, where artisans from all over get together and showcase and sell their wares. Drop by 4000 Rue Saint-Ambroise, Suite 278, and say hi to Astrid and the Wicked team, or head to inchubijou.com and enhance your style. The next Maleficarum Market will be on the weekend of February 8th and 9th. We'll see you there. Now, let's get back to the show, but before you do, make sure you subscribe to Game Over Montreal, Game Over Network, and smash like on this video because it really helps us out. Thanks, me with much less of a beard. Interesting to see how much you can change in a short period of time. welcome back to Game Over Montreal. I'm Andrew Berkshire. I'm here with Conor Tomalty, and we really appreciate everyone joining us here. It's a tough world out there right now, and we need to grab every tiny bit of joy that we can in these tumultuous times. And for you to choose to spend it with us after a game as fun as that one was for Montreal Canadiens fans, and I'm sure the Montreal Canadiens themselves, it really does mean a lot. And we appreciate every single one of you that comes here and hangs out with us because you're part of the show. You know, we're on here, we're bringing your commentary into it. Sometimes you catch stuff that we miss, and you make it a better show. Frankly, that's what it is. We build the community here, and you guys make it hum. You know, this is the space that we're trying to build with Game Over, a welcoming atmosphere that brings analysis that you can't really find in other mediums, and bringing a bit more honesty, we'll say, to your discourse, people that aren't afraid to tell you the truth, or at least keep it real. All right, I'm here with my buddy, Conor Tomalty, and we're going to tell you to get hyped about the Montreal Canadiens. Try not to overreact too much to the play coming out of the Four Nations break, but you combine that with what they did in December, early January. I know they had that tough stretch where they were losing a lot, but throughout that stretch, they were still playing good hockey. Ivan Demidov is probably going to be on this roster coming next year. They've got players in the American Hockey League who are ready or close to ready to making the jump and making an impact next year. Guys like Owen Beck, guys like, Joshua Wall, who looked better tonight than he did in the game before. You know, there's really a lot on this team to be excited about. And even with Kirby Dach now being uncertain, we are watching the best Habs hockey we've seen since 2021. It's only going to get better right now. Like, it's time to get hyped up. Like, I've already got this vision in my head, Connor, of like if I were the Canadiens game ops people, you know how they do like the hype up at the beginning of the game, the videos or whatever. I'd love to see them do one to like Le Cowboys Fringant and have it start with like footage of the players on the team as kids, and then you transition to like their first introduction to being on the team, whether it's like draft day or like, video the first time they're in the Bell Center after they get traded or acquired some other way. And then you show like their first time jumping onto the ice at the Bell Center. And then you switch to like the player portraits or whatever. And then you introduce like if there's anybody new coming in, like this is their first time. And it just builds this like, this is the team that you're building together. The pieces are locking into place. We're almost ready. Bernardo brings up Reinbacher might be ready next year too. Yeah. Like there's a lot of pieces that are slotting into place here for the Montreal Canadiens. This is going to be a very damn good team. I don't know if they're going to, like, I'm not going to say they're guaranteed to win a Stanley Cup or anything, but what they are building is so clearly going to be fun to watch for a good stretch of time. It's time to get hyped up.
Oh my God, absolutely. Also a reminder that Florian Xhekaj is absolutely killing it at the AHL level right now as well. Also a reminder that Michael Hage had an incredibly strong freshman campaign with a Michigan team that I don't have this take. My friends have this take. Isn't the strongest right now, to be honest with you. I don't know necessarily. I honestly have not always divulged into NCAA hockey when it comes to Michigan. I usually will look at like, Denver, Boston, all those locations, as well as like I've sort of like more been invested in the women's game. But Michael Hage was incredible. Demidov's coming over next year. There's just so many, like we talk about prospects for the Habs. It's crazy to think about that, like the young guys who have finally like sort of figured it out at the NHL level, and there's more guys coming. It's like hype is not the like right word. Like I simultaneously feel old because I have to see that these guys are born after me, and like that's the existential like dread that I have to go through. But if it's coming like if the bright light at the end of that tunnel is truly just like compelling hockey like we saw tonight, and a youthful team that is going to be running the show or taking the reins of like the most historic franchise in hockey for time to come, and as well just like providing really strong offense, which we haven't seen as a fan base, even like for decades. Like it's one of those things where it's like you're not just seeing like good gritty hockey, you're seeing hockey that's not just like a team that's competitive because of their defense. You're seeing a team that like is finding ways to win and is figuring out together, and it's down the line enough that like it's starting to find success. It's not success like where you're a top 5 seed, but it's a success where there were expectations that you weren't even going to finish near the wild card spot at the beginning of the year to now battling it out for that last wild card spot. And if they continue on this trajectory, might be a little bit higher up than we think they could be, and not in that, you know, creeping into the playoffs as much as it's like settled into a nice position in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I'm just saying, like, they beat a team here where they could face them in the playoffs. You know, like if they were managed to get into wild card 1. If they only get into wild card 2, if they make the playoffs, they will likely face the Washington Capitals, who are the surprise, like, craziest story in the NHL. The last time the Washington Capitals were the surprise craziest story in the NHL, they also faced a Montreal Canadiens team that nobody expected to make the playoffs. So I'm very interested in bringing that 2010 energy back. If that ends up happening, I think that would be really cool. I think that you could get the fan base super hyped by like combining little bits of that series and like pump up videos with things that have happened this year. And like those teams, the crazy thing about this Montreal Canadiens team right is we're talking about a team that has a first line center and 3 very good fourth line centers at this point. Like maybe Newhook's more of a third line guy, but he's not really a center. So let's like Jake Evans, I think, is better than a fourth line center. Christian Dvorak should be. I think this year he has been, but most of the time over the last stretch with the Canadiens has not been. The center depth is not great. And yet, I don't fear the Washington Capitals at all. I don't fear the Florida Panthers either. And maybe that's the lack of expectations. And, you know, like there's nothing to lose for the Canadiens against those teams. But to be where the Canadiens are right now and look at these top end teams and think, you know what, in a 7-game series, I could see them winning. I could see them pulling it out. I'm not saying they're the favorite, but I could see it happening. And I remember thinking at the beginning of this season, looking at the roster and thinking, I don't believe they're going to make the playoffs, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if they did. And as the season has gone on, you know, that looked real bad in the first month. But as the season has gone on, that's continued to be like a vindicating thing. They are pretty damn good. And for all the criticism of like Marty as a coach or the depth of the team or specific players not meeting certain expectations, they continue to find ways together.
That's it. Absolutely. I think one of the things that you point out when it comes to if they did face a Florida or a Washington and like the likelihood of them winning in a series, one of the most interesting things to me would be how do they react in a 7-game series? Because those are 2 teams that, yes, they're really good, but they also have a lot of good experience when it comes to the postseason. It's not like the Habs where it's like, yeah, you still have guys from that Stanley Cup Finals run, but like I look at that team and I kind of go like, okay, but like you're going to have to find it out together how you play in the postseason. And that's a different type of hockey. That's a different energy. It's a different, you know, read and react to the game. So like looking at a Panthers team that, you know, went the distance last year, looking at a Washington team with a good chunk of guys who have been there and done that, like Ovi almost feels like a distraction from like the fact that they are finding that much success at times. It's crazy to think that like Ovi is going to be passing like Wayne Gretzky in the goal scoring like thing. Like I just kind of think of, again off topic, but there was when LeBron passed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Roy Woods Jr. Did a Daily Show thing where he was asked to like talk about the State of the Union address, and he was like, I'm going to be so transparent. I didn't attend the State of the Union. I was at a bar watching LeBron James pass Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the all-time scoring effort. And honestly, like, you can criticize Ovi for the whole, like, you know, ties to Russia and everything, and like that is something that we should be talking about, I think, a bit more. But right now, I like, not to say like I'm going to be ignorant about it, but I'm definitely going to be in one of those bars watching him do it. And, you know, if it does happen, absolutely. But yeah, just back to the Canadiens, like, yeah, going against these teams would be interesting to say the least. Like, it would be really cool to see how this young team, steps up to the plate when it comes to the expectations that are going to be thrust about you. Like the atmosphere in Montreal for playoffs is off the charts, obviously, but especially like now that it's not like a COVID ridden like
Right?
arena and space, and like yeah, like trust me, the streets are still going to be flooded. You're still going to have probably somebody, if not with a giant branch this time, with a couple orange cones running around. But it's definitely going to be a cool atmosphere to see, and I'm just again, it's another sort of step on the path of what this franchise, not franchise as a whole, but this era of this franchise is going to do going forward.
Yeah. Trizek says ties to Russia. My guy, he is Russian.
Yeah,
I
you know what I
think
mean. You
I
know what
think
I
Connor
mean.
I think Connor meant directly Putin because he is like Putin's friend. Like
That's it. Yes.
and I think that's the thing. Like everything is political. Sports are political, but also like it is increasingly difficult for me to look at Ovechkin, who has ties to Putin, and like focus on him as like a big focal point of criticism. And like Malkin also has ties to Putin, when like almost every player in the NHL is probably a Trump supporter. And maybe that's changing now as things are waking up, but like it sure didn't change during the Four Nations face-off. When you listen to what the American players were saying, they are wildly ignorant of what's going on or just don't give a shit. So like I do think we should be talking about it 100%. And I think that like when I had Mike D'Souza on, which I ended up having to deal with a crazy night with the kids that night, and I feel like I put on a terrible show, which I felt really bad. But Mike D'Souza from the Narwhal was bringing up the Habs went to Russia this year to see Demidov, but ended up kind of being used for Russian propaganda. Like we do need to start talking about that and the implications of propaganda in the NHL, and also the fact that it's not just Russia. Like the USA is no longer a stable country. This shit's weird. We're in a weird spot.
We're in a very weird spot. I think one thing, I know I've talked about this person already, but if there's a Substack anybody wants to read, and I know like if you have issues with Substack, so do I. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is an excellent writer, and he actually did write on the Ovi situation much closer to like when Ukraine was first not first invaded, but like like when the war really broke out. He talked about the like ties with Ovechkin and Putin, and looking at like, yes, you're a superstar, but there are glaring issues at fault that need to be addressed. And when it comes to conservative like sports, because sports are very conservative in North America, all across the globe, in many Western places. But like, I don't know if there's, outside of like maybe baseball, a more apparent conservatorship than in hockey. I think we just like we do brush a lot under the rug for hockey, because again, it's that sort of privilege of having a lot of white athletes that are men. Like you're not gonna call them out like you will somebody in the NBA. You're not gonna call them out the way that you will somebody in the NFL. These are people like these are just a bunch of guys where it's like, oh yeah, I grew up with him. Oh, that kid, like, yeah, I remember him in high school. He had all the girls flocking to him and whatnot. And it's like these aren't all necessarily good things. Like when we do open that can of worms, or we peer into Pandora's box and see like really all the skeletons in the closet, it's bad. Like Four Nations Face Off was the first time in I think 4 years I wore something that said Team Canada Hockey on it. Like
Yeah.
truly, because I had like with everything that came out with that scandal, I had no desire to rock anything that said Team Canada like I did when I was growing up watching. And I'm sorry if anybody feels old watching Jordan Eberle and Taylor Hall like kill it at the World Juniors way back when. It was one of those situations where it was just like I don't have an immense amount of like Canadian pride, but like Four Nations did bring a bit out of me just because I was like, yeah, like screw the USA to a degree. Um, no, I have American friends who I love, obviously, but like this
Yeah,
is not
it's
the
not
time
about
to.
Americans,
It's
right?
not about America right now, or Americans right now. It's about like how you guys view us. We're not the 51st state. We're not your. It's not. It's not. Governor Trudeau. It's truly like we are our own country, and we're showing you we're no slouches either. So yeah, I guess that's just my little political tangent if you wanted.
Yeah, we will get back to hockey in a second here, but we should say a lot of this, like the conservative stuff, like, yeah, it's hockey, but mostly men's hockey. Women's hockey is
Yes.
a little bit of a different vibe, so we'll give them a break. But let's switch to expectation setting for the rest of the season here, and then we'll get to our Q&A quickly. But before we do, we got to talk about another one of our partners from right next to Inshibiju, Le Same Motel, a selfie studio where you can go have fun with your friends, or you can take pictures promoting your business, all sorts of cool stuff. So check it out. Looking to make awesome memories with your friends, take some promotional pictures or videos for your business? Check out Le Saint Motel in Montreal's Sud-Ouest borough. It's an amazing selfie studio located in Montreal's historic Chateau Saint-Ambroise, right next to Inchu Bijou. It boasts 12 plus unique decors for you to enjoy and make memories with. Hop into their iconic heart-shaped ball pit or transport yourself back in time to Expo 67. Le Saint Motel can also come to you with mobile decor setups available to rent for events, including setup and takedown, or you can head to lesaintmotel.com right now for more details, or to check out their amazing decors that are always being updated. Now, let's get back to the show, but before you do, make sure you subscribe to Game Over Montreal, Game Over Network, and smash like on this video because it really helps us out. Welcome back to Game Over Montreal. I am Andrew Berkshire here with Conor Tomalty, and we're talking setting expectations for the Montreal Canadiens for the rest of this season. I guess I should start with how do you feel about it, Connor? For me, I expect them to get close, but I don't expect the playoffs. I think they're going to get very close, and the team will not be satisfied, but I think the fan base will be pretty happy with the effort. But the team not being satisfied is going to be like what ignites the fire next year.
Absolutely. I think my biggest fear is recency bias. I'm curious that there's still a lot of hockey to be played. I'm like if let's say for the next 8 games, it's the same sort of pace and the same sort of effort that we're seeing and getting that success. But let's say they don't make the playoffs and the last 8 games, it's really like a more not say resembling to the start of the year, but all the things that were really blowing winds in the sails definitely die out. Then I think the fan base will be happy and they'll be satisfied to a degree. But I just hope recency bias or something like that doesn't rear its ugly head and really deflate all the positives that we're getting out of this year. Like expectations weren't set super high with this team coming into the year. I think as we're finding that success, we're starting to raise the bar slightly and slightly, not too much, obviously, nothing crazy, but enough where we're saying if you are a playoff team, next year is playoffs. Let's just say they sneak into the wild card, or even if they don't and they miss it by a couple points, is the expectation in the next year that it's playoffs or bust? That's a question I'm wondering about.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. It's like when is the inflection point where it's no longer hopefully we make the playoffs and it's like maybe you might be 1 year in, 1 year out, you're on that verge, and when is it you need to be in there? Moving into that, you're fighting for 5th, 6th in the East instead of 7th, 8th. I don't think it's too far away. You look at as soon as Demidov comes over, if Demidov is even half as good right away as he looks right now in the KHL, his numbers in the KHL are ridiculous, especially if you go by per minute, just per game, they look incredible. Right next to Kirill Kaprizov per minute, it's blows everyone out of the water. He's been doing this with a coach who tried to submarine him for half the season.
Yeah. He was the 13th forward apparently coming into the year. It was all those things where you're looking at this kid and you're I remember I did a game on at the early part of the year, and a big point of the talking point was how many minutes is Ivan Demidov going to get? And people on X were stop talking about the minutes for Ivan Demidov. We're all worried about that. We're all worried that he might not get enough time to develop. We were hearing those things where it was if SKA doesn't make a good run in the playoffs and they don't become champions, there's a chance Demidov doesn't come over because they want to see success for the continuous years. And you're listening to that and you're no, that's not I almost feel like a toddler because I'm no, that's not what I want. I want to see my lovable Russian buddy come over and have a good time with all his eventual boys. I want to see that. I want to see Demidov like you said, if he has even a sliver of the success he's finding in the KHL right now in the NHL next year, watch out. Oh my God, watch out. And as well with the names we've brought up, like Reinbacher and, with Waugh and, Beck going to have some more time under their belt and gathered as well. It's going to merit a really cool camp, at least, to see who stays and who has a fire lit under them and has had to go either to the the minors to a degree and work on their game, quote unquote, and fight for that spot coming back in, because it's going to be again, there's so much youth to this team, prospect wise, and also just who you have right now, that it is going to be interesting to see down the stretch who comes in, who makes an impact. And I honestly, I'm here to see the guys that we're sort of maybe not talking about enough really like cement themselves in the sense of like we talked about Struble earlier, not saying Struble is this amazing, like, he's leading the team or by any means, but like just to see him settle in the way Jack Eye has taken a step this year, like
Yep.
I just can't wait to see like even Montembeau, like we've talked about his consistency, but him getting sort of settled, Dobesh with his truly first year in the NHL. There's just so much to like be excited for as a Habs fan.
Yeah, and I think it was Paradiggity mentioned it in the chat. I saw it like 20 minutes ago, but I didn't get a chance to call it out. But to what you're saying, he was mentioning even the cap situation looks really manageable as the cap starts increasing in number. So there's an opportunity not just to have all of your young core players locked in long term, but to add at the same time as the NHL like spending situation opens up a little bit, like provided the world doesn't completely collapse in the next couple of years, it's going to be extremely fun to be a Montreal Canadiens fan. Like at least that part of your life will be extremely fun. So there is that to focus on, and I think it is fun. There, I saw Paradiggity also mentioned a couple other expectations. Caulfield hits 40 goals. Suzuki hits point per game. I'm going to take the over on both of those. How about you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I think that's one of the things like I wrote down in my book earlier, just like for next season, like what am I expecting goal wise? And I said like I think I put like Caulfield 40 goals or more, just because like I think after this year we're really like I only see him finding more ways to be elusive on the ice, finding like his positioning this year has been so strong. Like we've always known him as like this more like the really good shot. He was the best goal scorer in his draft class. But like now we're seeing the ways in which like he does figure himself up. The goal he scored tonight was just one where like he had open space to shoot. It's a tough angle, but if somebody's gonna score, it's gonna be him for this team. So I said like him 40 goals. Suzuki, I say like I always set the bar a little bit lower, but Suzuki I said 30 to 35. I wouldn't be surprised if he could surpass that, but I think he is more a pass first guy. So like that's where he's gonna get most of his bread and butter. I said Slav 20 plus goals. I even put down Line A just because of like I was doing some math, even though I'm terrible at math. Just like trying to do like games played versus like points per game. And like he's only played, I think, 36 games this year. But like even when he was with Columbus and like he played like I think 55 and 56 games, he was at just like like 25 or 26 goals, something like that. So like he's basically on the same pace this year. It's like 0.4 something versus 0.46 something is the difference between the two. Again, I'm not great at math. I had to do a lot of double checking calculations just to make sure I'm not, you know, like going on some weird tangent and I'm just like playing with a calculator instead of watching proper hockey. But at the same time, like it was just one of those situations where I'm like looking at it and I'm like, if you add in those four guys with how Line can execute on the power play, and then you bring in a Demidov, and then eventually like you have guys who can figure it out, hopefully from the AHL into the NHL, and even like down the line, me looking at a guy like Michael Hage, who if you want a good center, that we're talking about like having depth at the center position, he's a guy that like I'd like to see fill out just a little bit more, just so he can absorb a bit more contact. But like when you look at those drop pass plays like on the power play, I see Michael Hage going end to end and being able to either set somebody up or put the puck where it needs to be. So like yeah, there's a lot to like be optimistic about when it comes to that end.
Yeah, you can see it's like I remember when Jesperi Kotkaniemi broke into the league, there was a lot of talk about one of the issues with his game was he had a lot of good skills, but he had trouble layering those skills together. Like matching a zone entry with a deke and a shot. It was like he couldn't put those movements together in a functional way at the NHL level. And in a more abstract and like team way, you can see them building layers of offense and defense in their structure as a team, both at the NHL level and with the prospects that they're bringing in. Like you can look at how Hage plays, how Demidov plays, and kind of slot that in to what the Canadians are doing at the NHL level and say like, yeah, okay, I see that. This play that they're running here, that is something you can see Hage already working on in college, right? And there's communication downstream throughout the organization that did not exist before. We talked about Adam Nicholas and all that he's done for the organization, but I remember when Ken Hughes came in, it was like day one, he was talking about creating a development program where there was constant communication between the prospects and like their coaches and the Montreal Canadiens to get the best out of each and every player. And you can see the results of that coming with the Canadiens constantly. It's great. It is really great and it's really fun to do. But let's switch to the Q&A section. I'm going to ask everyone again for their thoughts on the Laine thing. We'll get into that quickly to start it off, and then we'll open it up to questions from the stream chat here. I'm just going to quickly transition to overtime. And there we are. We are in overtime. So thoughts on the Patrick Laine thing. I saw somebody had posted that there was an RDS personality talking about it. I believe it was Luc Gélina. Now, in my experience, Luc is a pretty decent dude, and I don't think he's usually somebody who posts like a lot of like hot takes or like trying to get attention things. But for those who are better at translating French than me, and I'm not great, you can correct if there's any wrong intention. But what I saw that Gélina said was that nobody believed that Laine was sick. Now, if you saw Laine last game, I believe whether it was talking to the media or during the game, he looked pretty damn sick, but he still got 2 points and now scored again tonight, had another great game. What's your thoughts on this, Connor? Like, what is going on that they were into? Like, there was a bunch of stuff written that I saw that was talking about like the Canadiens might be done with Laine, or like there was a rift in the room because he wasn't really sick and he was missing time. It was like this weird like innuendo that people didn't believe that he was sick, but clearly sick.
Well, you know what's funny about that is because like all of last week, I was sick. And I had probably one of the worst flus I've had this year. Like I'm somebody who gets my flu shot every year. Like I'm big on vaccines. But like was fully like coughing up a lung. This orange juice container, like I have 3 liquids with me for this stream. Like this container at the start of today was about here. Because I'm not that I'm still sick, but I'm trying to fight it off a little bit and need that vitamin C. So like if there was a rift in the room, I'm not in the room. I couldn't tell you if that's the situation. I think that's something I really want to emphasize to people is just that like if you're not in the room, you don't truly know what's going on. There's a lot of he said, she said, they said that's going on, but in actuality, we don't know what's going on. When somebody's sick, like or just
Also, I was going to
anybody,
say that also applies to media who are in the room for a few moments after games or before games, but they're not actually in the room. So they
yes.
might have a source telling them something, but they don't actually know.
And you never know if that source was just in a bad mood because that player, like did something to like you never know. Like broken
Yeah.
telephone is a thing. Like let's just emphasize that a little bit. But I think like if he was sick and his body wasn't feeling good, like the person who understands their body the most is the person in that body. Like and that's the situation where it's like if he was sick, even if he was sick but still, healthy enough to play, I could maybe see them like when you're pushing for the playoffs and you want a guy who's brought in at the start of the year because he is that goal scorer that you were sort of looking for, and you see how he's performing on the power play and just between him and Hudson, how much that power play is just, improved for lack of a better term this year. Like, yeah, I can see maybe some people being upset about it when you see guys like Matheson at the beginning of the year taking a fight with somebody after seeing like one of his guys get hit in the head, even though he's dealing with like an upper body injury the whole time. It rubs people the wrong way when you're, again, like fighting the sniffles, if you will, and you can't
Right.
get on the ice. But like with Laine's history, like you don't know like how much a cold can really knock him out. You don't know if it's like he did like a couple laps around the rink and he felt like he was going to pass out. You really don't know how it can affect you, especially like if you do want to look at stuff like I'm not saying he has COVID or anything, but long COVID is a thing. Like there's a
Yep.
lot of things that we don't acknowledge in like the post the pandemic. I still think we don't acknowledge enough, and that's like we should be more aware of our bodies when we're sick. We should be taking a longer look at things. If you have a cough and you need to go to work, you should be wearing a mask. Like it's all those things where it's like
Yep.
these are just very basic things where it's like when it comes to health, again, we're not in the room where it's happening, but if Line is the type of guy who needs to prioritize that, I think in this day and age you kind of just let him. And like like again, if the Habs were in a situation like the Habs being in the situation where they're pushing for the playoffs, it makes sense to sort of look at him and be like, what's going on? But I think it's still just like that's the ugly side of Montreal media is there's way too much emphasis on this very minute niche detail inside that locker room that we don't know for a fact.
Yes, and I think and I'm not saying that anybody was insinuating anything like this. However, Patrick Laine is very open about mental health, right? And struggles that he's had in that arena. And we saw how Jonathan Drouin was treated in Montreal. I did not appreciate a lot of the stuff that was said. We saw how Carey Price was treated at times, going through his own struggles. We saw him be shut out in the Masterton voting in his own city while winning it from outside markets, and then how incredibly reactive Montreal media was to being criticized for shutting out Carey Price in that moment. There are blind spots, right? And I think when you're insinuating that somebody who the organization is saying is sick is not sick, and they have a history of issues in the mental health arena that they've had to deal with, I think you really need to be careful about driving speculation in that situation, because you are going to get people to assume things and maybe say things that are not great. And it just doesn't need to happen. Like, we can be better than that as media, and everybody can make mistakes sometimes. I know I've made them many a time. So I'm not, trying to rake anybody over the coals here, but we don't need to be pushing this kind of stuff. I think it is the main takeaway. There was a good question in here from Trizak that I think is perfectly suited for what we do here at Game Over Montreal. Coming to Montreal for the first time as an adult, Trizak, for the Habs Flyers game on April 5th. Anything that they should know or experience in Montreal coming in from Toronto? Well, obviously, I got to say, you got to check out Inchi Bijou and Saint Motel, especially if you want to take some cool selfies. But also, I always push Ma Promole in Plateau. Is that Myland, that north?
I think so.
It's
if I'm
on
not
Rachel.
mistaken. Yeah.
It's right across from Le Banquise, which is like the tourist trap poutine place, and it's fine, especially in the middle of the night if you've been drinking. But go across the street, get some Portuguese chicken poutine with the spicy piri-piri on there. It is a different experience. In my opinion, best poutine on the island. Go try it. That's my go-to. Don't get the large. It is very well priced, but the large will not too much. If you're going to share with another person, another full adult, then get the large. But you don't need the large.
That's a really good thing about like major cities like Montreal, especially ones that like has that sort of like mosaic of like different cultures that we have here. Like
Yes.
we always are like sort of like we always want to go towards a thing that's like typical Quebecois, like La Banquise. Let me go to a Belle Pro or a La Fleurs or something like that. But some of the best food that you're going to get is that hole in the wall place.
Yep.
Excuse me. So, see, I'm still sick. I'm still fighting it. We'll take a OJ's shot in a sec. Is still that sort of situation where you can walk in somewhere and get a blend of just like different types of food. Like I had a friend come in from Ottawa, and she had never heard of Bustan. Like it was like one of those situations where I was like, this is fast food to us. Like this is not like the haute couture of Lebanese cuisine. It's something where it's like, yeah, it's $9 for a shawarma. Like what do you like you're not gonna complain about that, but like she was blown away by it. She was like, this is like the best I've ever had. Not to like do a unpaid sponsorship for Bustan by any means, but I'm just saying like that's the great best thing is like Montreal's great food. Like we have fantastic food in this city. And do not shy away from going somewhere that's a little bit strange looking, like truly.
Seriously. Yeah. Anything that is unfamiliar, try it out, and that is one of the great things about Montreal's food scene. Like you said, sometimes it is a hole in the wall. Sometimes our most famous institutions like St. Viateur, Fairmont Bagel, those places are cheap, man. Like the price point on those is incredible for the value you're getting, especially fresh out of the oven. Man, it's special here. It's a special town.
Andrew, those were some weird noises you were making, but I'm not gonna ask any questions. Everybody's relationship with food is different. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
I was lifting myself with the chair too, so I'll blame that.
Sure, absolutely.
We'll move on from food here for a second here. Let's see if there's any other questions in here. Oh, someone mentioned Chemcoba is great, absolutely great. And if you go to Chemcoba, you can get the sorry, blanking, Italian potato pasta
Gnocchi?
gnocchi. Yes, the place that sells like it's like $5 for like a Chinese takeout container of gnocchi and sauce, and it's delicious every time. I forget the name of the place that sells it, but it's right next to Chemcoba in the plateau. It's fantastic. So yeah, the thing about Montreal is like go to a metro stop, get out of the metro stop, look around. There's probably something cool. You know, it's such a diverse town where like each borough has its own personality, and like there's different like in a way you don't really want like segregation of a city, but there's also like little communities over time that have been built in Montreal from different areas of the world that have their own like scene here, and it's really cool. It's one of the coolest cities I've ever been to. I've been to a fair amount of cities. Andrew Gisbrick says I'm not even gonna try to pronounce that. Rogera? That might be the name of the place that does the gnocchi, but anyway. Bernardo Sonny says, "Does Hudson still have a chance at being a top four?" Yeah, I think he's got a chance, Bernardo. Here's a question for you all in the chat. Canadians are going to have a lot of cap space to deal with over the next couple of seasons. They've got great pieces coming in. What do you want them to spend it on? Looking around the NHL, what do you think they could spend it on? What do you think, Connor?
I think again, like just getting the boys some Bustan would be fantastic. And oh no, I was gonna no, that's actually I don't know. Like it's one of those things where it's like I kind of want to see. I'm not relying on the prospects. Like I'm not saying like we should be like letting them run wild a little bit, but like I want to see like who finds their place first, if that makes sense. Like I don't want to just jump into like the market and like bringing in some key pieces would be cool. Like I think like looking at the center position is essential. Like I think
Yep.
we've highlighted that a little bit frequently, not just as of late, but throughout the majority of the year. But like seeing where the prospects are going to be, who are going to be like NHL ready, or at least like NHL camp ready next year, that's going to be number one. Defensively, I couldn't really look at anything specific. Goaltending, I'm not looking at anything specific. So yeah, I think for me, it was just the center position was a big one for me. Outside of that, just seeing where the prospects go and adjusting on the not on the fly, but adjusting and seeing the needs that you're going to be needing.
100%. I see Bernardo's joking says, or not Bernardo, sorry, Outrager says, Devo extension. My only thought when I saw that, I know Outrage is joking, but you know that in Inception when they're like defending, and then Tom Hardy like comes up, he's like, "You need to dream a little bigger," and like brings out like a grenade launcher. Every time I think of that, when somebody says something that's just like a joke, but it's not aiming high enough. You got to dream a little bigger. Bernardo says Sidney Crosby, which is what I've been pushing for the last little while. I don't think it'll happen next year because he's got more time left on his contract, but I think the time for Crosby in Montreal is going to be when that contract runs out. And for those thinking he's going to be too old, first of all, he's the same age as me, so F you. Second of all, I think Crosby could play until he's 45 and still be awesome the whole time.
Oh my God, yeah. We're the way that he like. I know I've brought up a lot of basketball tonight, but like when you look at LeBron and like we talk about longevity, and like how much money he's invested in his body and his fitness. Sidney Crosby, it's like that too. Like when
Yep.
Sidney Crosby came into the league, there were such high expectations for him. And like one of the first things he had to do, besides like get past that crybaby label, was he put on like 50 pounds because he knew he was getting hit harder than before. It wasn't like Wayne Gretzky back in the day where there was a guy who would run somebody over for him and he didn't have to go into a quarter and fight. Crosby had to defend himself. And Crosby's a type of guy who's looked at his body, and we're seeing like the impact that he can make, and like just the way he was at Four Nations as well. Like Crosby isn't like slowing down is maybe not the right usage of this, because like obviously like age does play a factor. No offense, Andrew. Like I'm not ageist. I just want like I think that Crosby's gonna still be good for years to come. If he does land in Montreal, I think it would be something really special. And even if it's not a long period of time that he has left, like he has that decision at the end of the day as to when he wants to hang up his skates. But like you said, I think there's a lot more emphasis on, you know, not smoking like 2 packs like in between periods, having 12 hot dogs, and then running back out on the ice to try and score a goal. Like a lot more things are strategized now, and we're seeing more people, especially with the heightened like injuries that we're seeing across different sports leagues and different things that are like ACL tears are higher than it's ever been before and stuff like that. Seeing a guy like Crosby be healthy, and if he did eventually land in Montreal, like again, like the atmosphere we saw at the Bell Center for Four Nations would not be I would not be surprised if it's bigger and far more grandiose, I should
Oh,
say.
could you imagine how loud the Bell Center would be if you're introducing like the first game of the season and Sidney Crosby is skating out in a Habs jersey?
Even
I would be
crazier,
worried. I would be
even
worried about
crazier.
the structure of the building.
Yes, yes. That and like let's just say he learns a couple lines of French and he takes a microphone and he does a Brian Giunta, except like pronounces it probably a bit better and does a
I mean,
starting
he knows
lineup.
some
He
because he
knows
played
some.
in Rimouski.
Absolutely. He did. Yeah, QMJ guy. Like the absolutely. Like I can't wait to see like imagine he did a French interview. This place would go nuts. The way I cover a lot of Victoire games, Laura Stacy, who isn't a francophone but is married to obviously the francophone, uh, uh has been doing a couple pre-game interviews as people are still coming into the arena in French. And you're seeing like even Aaron Ambrose is throwing out a couple words here and there. And just the appreciation in this city for stuff like that. Like, oh my God, if Crosby did that, oh my God. I mean, again, this is all speculation and like we're definitely inceptioning, dreaming a little bigger here. But at the
Yeah,
same time, like, man, oh my God, just thinking of that alone, like,
we are
oh.
tampering as much as we possibly can.
Mhm.
Avery from Game Over Edmonton just joined the chat and says, "Remember when Crosby came back in 06-07 and just beat the crap out of Andrew Ference in a fight? He just like came back jacked. Like, yeah, that is kind of what happened, right? He was trying to figure out how to stay healthy after all those concussions. And also, I saw Kay said that Crosby's biggest asset is his brain. I must disagree. It's his bum. Sidney Crosby has the biggest legendary bum. Everybody that you talk to in media who's ever seen him in the locker room is like, what the hell? This guy has a mutant ass. It's so large. This is how he destroys everyone in the NHL. Most giant ass in the history of hockey.
Whoever's doing our clipping after this show, can we just clip that without context and just have like Andrew Bumlover or whatever Crosby Bumlover and put that on some merch for us if possible? Thank you, please and thank you. Okay, you
Oh,
and I will
God.
take notes.
Got to do like the stupid, sexy Flanders meme, but it's just Crosby.
Stupid, sexy Flanders.
All right. I think that's the show that we have for you tonight. We went super long. Thank you so much for joining us here with it. It was a hype game. The Montreal Canadiens might make the playoffs, folks. The rebuild was shorter than I thought. I'll be honest.
How long is the
Going
window
well.
open? That's the next question, but
It feels like it might be open for a good stretch of time. That's the craziest
absolutely.
part. It's really hype. All right, folks. Thanks for joining us here. We'll see you in the next one. Talk soon.